In the grimdark future where everyone's having a very bad day, like forever, humanity has developed some of the most insanely powerful firearms for their untold billions to shoot at Xenos monstrosities across endless battlegrounds, only to find out that these weapons have as much of an impact as a laser pointer on a cat. So the Emperor in all his wisdom created superhuman warriors, the Astartes, that can just fire rocket-propelled bullets instead, and beat the aliens with their armored fists. But even with that, with superhuman strength, speed, endurance and power armor, there still exist threats and situations in the grimdark that require even more strength, durability and extra power. And for these types of scenarios, enter the Terminator and the Dreadnought armors. So firstly, the Terminator armor is basically one of the strongest and toughest armors that humans have ever made in 40k. It is so rare and expensive to maintain that only the most experienced and elite Space Marines, usually veterans, get to wear it. This walking brick house is also called a tactical dreadnought armor, because naming things normally would just be too mundane. It trades speed for beefy protection like wearing the entire NFL defensive line, but somehow still makes you a stealthy unit cause Warhammer lore just vibes like that. Who am I to complain? In these things you can't run, you can't hide, but you can teleport directly into the worst part of a battlefield and start redecorating with plasma and shame. The Terminator armor adds even more thick layers, metal layers on top, especially in the front. It is so strong that there's a story of one guy surviving being stepped on by a freaking titan. So yeah, Terminator armor is for when you wanna feel like a god but walk like a fridge, teleport into hell and you're gloriously impractical, overpowered and about as subtle as a fart in a confessional booth. The most used Terminator armors are the Indomitus pattern in the current era. Then there's also the Tartarus and the Cataphracti patterns which were common during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy era. There are also the rare Gorgon and Acronac patterns. The Custodes also have their own patterns, the Alaris and Aquilon ones, and the Grey Knights have their Aegis patterns. All these tactical dreadnought armors have one thing in common. They only add a little bit to the overall height and size of the wearer, so around 8 to 9 feet tall for the Astartes, who are usually 7.5 feet tall, and around 10 to 11 feet for Custodes. However, now we shift our view to the Saturnine Terminators, which was seen in full in the recent Horus Heresy trailer and a Saturnine box set for the upcoming campaign. The origins of the Saturnine technology is a mystery, with the Imperium, famously bad at record keeping unless it's about guilt or tides, has no clue where this beefy masterpiece came from. All we know is that it wasn't made on Mars by the usual gang of engine worshippers, but instead by the tech hipsters hanging out in Saturn's secret enclaves. Now picture your average Terminator armor or Marine already a unit and then crank it up to but why though? Early versions of this chat tier armor showed up during the end of the Unification Wars when Terra was basically Mad Max with extra war. It wasn't until Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders, part-time blacksmith, full-time walking killing machine, decided to tinker with the design that Saturnine armor truly went on from death machine to death machine with style. And the most noticeable element are the huge shoulder pauldrons on the shoulders, obviously, that almost go semi-circle. And need I say, these units are gonna be bad for urban warfare. Like, I know you won't enter through doors cause you just smash through them, but what about narrow alleys? Smash again, duh. And to top it all, we did a measurement, at least from the released official images of the miniatures, and if my estimation is correct, of which I'm sometimes wrong, these Saturnine Terminators would be around 4 meters in height. That means 13 feet in freedom units, and that means they are taller than any other Terminator, even taller than the custodian Aquilons and Alaris. And to spice things up a bit, for this comparison streak, these Saturnine Terminators are even taller than the most common Castroferum Dreadnoughts, which are themselves around 3.7 meters or 12.1 feet tall, as by the technical specifications of the Mechanicus. Hey, don't shoot me, I just deliver the message. This is a first and also controversial piece of information, isn't it? A Terminator bigger than a Dreadnought. Anyway, now we come to the Dreadnoughts. So remember the quote, "Only in death does duty end." Well, the Imperium has a way around it, and technically, even if you're just a brain and a spinal cord swimming in a life support tank, well, technically, you're not dead, and so you'll have to still punch in on certain Mondays. That is actually the essence of the Dreadnought armor, the bigger sibling of the Terminator. Dreadnoughts are what happens when a Space Marine takes a fatal L on the battlefield but is just too stubborn to stay dead. Instead of a coffin, they get slammed into a gigantic armored sarcophagus plugged into a mech the size of a small house. And then because therapy doesn't exist in the 41st millennium, they're sent right back into battle to scream in binary and flatten heretics with arms that end in flamethrowers or palms that can bitch slap a dinosaur to sleep. These bad boys are clad in armor thicker than your average Reddit threads on power scaling, made of adamantium, ceramite and pure spite. It is immune to most weapons unless those weapons are planet-ending, and inside, a half-dead veteran with enough trauma, rage and salt to power a Black Library anthology. They're revered by their chapter like grumpy grandparents, plug into war machines and often talk to like ancient relics, because they actually are. Except they can also talk back, usually with "I remember the heresy," followed by the sound of something exploding violently. They're slow, loud and about as stealthy as a nightclub on fire, but they make up for it by being literal walking gun platforms. Think of them as ancient war gods powered by pain, nostalgia and an unholy amount of ammo. Like everything else in Warhammer, these dreadnoughts also have a lot of patterns like the common Castroferum, the Contemptor and the rare Furibundus patterns, which are all around 12.1 feet or 3.7 meters tall. There are also the bigger Redemptor and the massive Leviathan, which would both be somewhere between 5 and 6 meters, or between 16.5 and 20 feet tall. At least that's what they look like, since James Porkchop is too lazy to specify details for lore. But here's where they muddy the waters even more. The newly revealed Saturnine Dreadnought is stated to be even bigger, even larger than the imposing Leviathan Dreadnoughts. This new, well actually very old beast is basically what happens when Warhammer decides moderation is heresy. Bigger, badder and beefier than the already terrifying Leviathan, the Saturnine Dreadnought is kinda like a knight now, except with the same loophole which applies the duty unto death. However, the new lore drop-in says that not just any legionary could be entombed in these formidable constructs, only a warrior of exceptional willpower and focus can pilot one, which I would personally translate it to GigaChat almost dead half a body missing space marine. So aside from atomic disintegrator weapons, how big actually are they? As per our expert consultations, geometrical analysis and mathematical estimations, which in a nutshell is just drawing a line, we find out that the Saturnine Dreadnoughts might be over 25 feet in height, or around 7.6 meters tall, and take that with a pinch of salt. That means it towers over the Leviathan Dreadnoughts, which is what the lore drop-in by Warhammer says. At this height, they would be around the size of a Custodian Dreadnought, or maybe even bigger, and yeah, they would be as tall or even taller than certain patterns of knights, more specifically the Armiger Knights. And that answers the question as to why Space Marines don't pilot knights, they have these. Also, when compared to the other Astartes Dreadnoughts, all of them look like different levels of midgets on steroids. And that is how big the new Saturnine Dreadnoughts are. And with that we end this video. If you like this one, then check this other one too in the end screens. Do hit that like button for support and smash the subscribe button to be a part of Legio Nutbug. Till the next time, take care boys.